Welcome to Pro Audio Profiles. I'm Brennan Decora, and on this show, we focus on techniques for inspired studio performances. Each week, I host experts from across the industry. Let's get started. Today, we have Mike Pepe. He's a producer and songwriter who's worked with Taking Back Sunday, the Struts, Charlotte Sands, Plain White Tees, and Mod Sun, among many more. Enjoy. First and foremost, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate being on the show.
Thank you for being here, because you're actually at my studio, so I appreciate it. You made it easy on me. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course. I'd like to start by, if you could go over your backstory, kind of what led you to be where you are, how you got here, all that stuff. Yeah.
I always think that's the best way to start these.
Right.
Because when I was listening to or not that I don't listen to these, but when I was trying to get into things,
right,
you know, and I would listen to interviews with producers or songwriters or whatever, sometimes they would just skim over how they actually got into it, and they were just starting from the fact that they were doing it, which is good. I guess that's where the advice sort of happens, probably. Yeah. But also, it's just like, well, yeah, but how did you do? How are you? How did you get to the point where I'm listening to you talk about this? Right. I think.
And why do I care what you're talking about?
Yeah. Why do I care what you're talking about? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I actually I like that question a lot. Cool. I don't do a lot of these interviews, so that always is nice.
Yeah.
So I am a producer and songwriter, occasional mixer, but I don't really put that out there because I will only really mix things that I produce.
Right.
Like people don't like send me mixes.
Right.
You know, I'm not really that guy. But if like I turn a song in and the label's like, hey, we like your mix a lot, can we use it? I'm like, sure, like that's fine. Like I'll put some makeup on it, you know.
Right.
But I don't consider myself like I work with Tom Lord Alge mix a lot of my stuff, and like he's like a mixer. Like I'll send stuff to him, and he brings it back. I'm like, I sound like a genius. This is awesome. Like he's like a mixer, you know. Tom, shout out to Tom.
Right.
So I got here. Like I said, I'm a producer songwriter. I'm based here in Los Angeles, California. How I got here was, I mean, I have a similar story as a lot of producers in the sense of when I was a teenager, I was playing in a band, and
where are you from?
Oh, where am I from? Okay, I'm originally from Long Island, New York.
Okay.
But I did my formidable years, like high school, in North Carolina.
Okay.
Back in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I guess we'll pick the story up there.
Yeah.
Is basically where I found music when I was in like middle school, high school, which was in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Nice.
Picked up a guitar and started playing in a punk band where we would do like Ramones covers, Blink-182 covers, Green Day covers, Sex Pistols covers.
Yeah.
And then we eventually started to try and write our own songs. It was really just repurposing those chords and arrangements as our own, but putting our own melody and lyrics on it, which I guess essentially is, you know,
that's kind of what
songwriting is. You know what I mean? So, but, you know, at the time I was like, you know, we were really just lifting those things, you know.
Of course.
But I found very early on that I was playing guitar and singing in that band. And we had gone to do a demo at a studio in North Carolina, and it was just like a miserable experience because I would say this in the producer's defense, or that guy's defense, we were a bad band. We were a 14, 15-year-old punk band. You know what I mean? So like we weren't good.
Right.
So I can't imagine like I was sitting there thinking like, this is what I wanted to do with my life. You know what I mean? Like, so having said that, it was a pretty negative experience. Not that he was like mean to us. It just like, it was just very much like, go in there and play your shit, and then I'll get you a CD burned later. Right. Like, okay, like there wasn't any like all the things I wanted to do with making a record. You know, like I'd follow like how like Dookie was made, or how An State was made, or how all these records I loved were made. Well, that was not the experience we had. Which again, like I said, we were also paying probably $300 for a day to sit with this guy. So there was a disconnect there. Every time I tell the story, I never want to throw that guy under the bus. Not that I would name him, but even if I did, it's like probably not his fault.
Right.
Having said that, it was upsetting to me as a blossoming musician and artist, you know, that I didn't get that experience.
Right.
So I was like, well, fuck that. I can curse. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Like, all right, fuck that. Yeah. You know, so for Christmas that year, I had, the only thing I asked for was an 8-track recorder, a digital 8-track recorder, a Fostex MR8. I don't know if you ever know them. They're a little ugly red thing.
Yeah.
And it recorded to this little disc inside of it, and then had a CD burner on it, which was actually pretty cool, honestly.
That's all you need.
Right. At the time, that was really, even now, that's all you need, But that was the only thing I wanted. It came with like Cakewalk 1 or something or 2, And that's the only thing I wanted. So my parents being supportive of that, and those weren't really that expensive either at the time. They were pretty cheap little things, but to me, that was the thing that I needed.
Right.
I got it.
Nice.
Very quickly, I started to make a demo for the band in the drummer's garage, because that's where we practiced. Was our drummer's garage, and I found really quickly that I really enjoyed the process of that more than I did actually writing the songs.
Okay.
I really enjoyed what I didn't know was being a producer and songwriter.
Yeah.
More than I did the actual like performance of it, like sitting there and getting my parts down, singing, oh, that's the wrong fucking note, or like even like at the time we were playing live a lot because obviously we were a punk band, so like we were playing. I fucking hated playing live, and I was kind of like not putting it together. Right, I was young, I was 15 years old, so I'm like, why don't I like doing the things that all my heroes are doing?
Right.
Why don't I like doing the things that Joey Ramone's? You know what I mean? Like, and at the time, I didn't really know, when you're 15, you don't know what a producer is. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but I really took to it, where I'm like, I really enjoyed getting a performance out of the drummer, out of my twin brother, who was the bassist.
Okay.
I liked songwriting and figuring out why something wasn't right more than the actual act of, again, performing and all that stuff.
Playing live and all
playing live and even just sitting there and, like I said, doing take after take of myself. I really didn't like any of that shit, So really quickly, I kind of figured out, well, whatever this thing is, this little MRA thing, whatever my mind is doing in this garage with the band, like whatever this thing is what I actually want to do.
Right.
So I started like searching, like basing online, like how to record, how to do this and that. And that's when I started seeing the term record producer and songwriter.
Right.
And then, you go down the Wikipedia hole or whatever it was at the time, you know what I mean? And start reading about what this is. And I'm like, oh, that's what I wanted. That's what I want to do. Right. I thought it was playing a band, which objectively, I guess it was until you start doing it. And like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And then I started looking up who produced and song wrote on all the records I liked. Right. So all of a sudden, I learned about Jerry Finn, Rob Cavallo, Eric Valentine, who we were just talking about for the interview.
Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on, right? Phil Spector. I started learning about all these producers and songwriters, and then there was this click that happened where I started looking up all of the producers' records and songs and realizing that I liked their work better than I did maybe even the band's.
Right.
In other words, like every time Jerry Finn would work with a band, I liked that record the best.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Or every time Rob Cavallo did an album, that's my favorite record from that band. Or every time Eric touched it, and I'm wondered like now I understood the threading of that. I really enjoy these guys' work, maybe even more than the band's work, right? Because then they go off and do a record with somebody else. I'm like, I don't like this record as much. Why?
Yeah.
Never, as a kid, you don't put that together.
Right.
You start to learn about what that is. Like, there's something about these guys that I actually appreciate maybe even more than the band sometimes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even recently, I saw on Spotify there was a playlist like everything by Nigel Godrich, for example, and it was like, oh. I get it now.
Precisely,
yeah.
And I actually like that Spotify and Apple Music have doing that lately, which it's like, here's a foray into this songwriter or producer.
Right.
Because when I was a kid, I'm going to date myself a bit, but I was downloading shit from like Napster,
right?
And the iTunes store, and those credits didn't exist then. I mean, that was archaic compared to what we have. I mean, it was archaic, but especially compared to what we have now. But then there was really when you download something from Napster, there sure as fuck wasn't going to be a producer or songwriter credit.
Yes.
And even when you pay 99 cents for the album on iTunes, that didn't exist. People weren't. It was a Wild West. People weren't really getting credit. Necessarily, you had to be me and want to learn about that shit to understand what that.
Which honestly, I think is a shame. Like even today, it's difficult to find credits.
It's more
now,
difficult than it should be. At least it's feasible, but it's not. Yeah, you don't turn the CD over and it's not just there. You know what I mean? For sure, that was the heyday of producers and people like of us. It's like, it's in black and fucking white, right in the back of the CD. You can't miss it. You know,
even have recording studios listed.
100% recording. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So that was the golden age. But I was in the middle ground where like that really the CDs were around, but my generation was really more into iTunes and digital downloads because like I'm just young enough where I kind of missed the CDs being the thing.
Right.
It was a thing, but it really wasn't
Right.
the consumption method.
Of course.
That we really were using. Me and my friends were using computers, even then, Napster and iTunes and Kazam and all that shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And ruining our parents' computers, basically, with all of it. You know,
all
my
the
poor dad,
viruses.
with all the viruses and shit. I don't give a fuck. Download all small things video 18 times, see which one works. You know.
Exactly.
So.
Nice.
Through that, I went. Sorry for the long story, but actually,
of course.
this is kind of the thing I always say is like, this is the shit I wish people said.
Of course.
When you listen to these interviews, when I was a kid, I'm like, I don't. How did you do it? I don't understand. You know.
Right.
So through that, I did go to school for record production and songwriting.
That's cool.
I went to a school called the Recording Workshop. It's
Okay.
like a specialty school in Ohio. I wanted to go to Full Sail, but my parents cannot afford it. I come from a very wonderful family, but we're not like, richest people in the world or anything like that. So like, well, we can't afford Full Sail, but there's other place that we can go that's like in our budget, and it seems to be similar in course thing, which is fine. Because to be honest with you, I didn't even really want to go at all.
Right.
I mean, I just wanted to start making albums.
Yeah. You were already making albums. Like
I kind of already was. My God, they sounded fucking awful, but I was doing it. As a matter of fact, funny enough, I mean, because we would play shows with all my friends from high schools, from high school, and we had my band had CDs.
Right.
Because I had that little burner on the MRA.
Of course.
And all my friends thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
So all of them would ask, hey, how did you make your CD? You know, like, that's awesome. And I'm like, oh, I made it. So all of them would be like, can you do it for us? I'm like, yeah, fuck it. Like, sure, pay me $50, you know? So, and I would go to their garage, just like I did the Arab garage, and fuck with them and produce them for a weekend for $50, and I would go to the movies as I was rich, you know what I mean? And I was 15 years old, you know what I mean? Like, nobody else had jobs. That was like the closest thing to a job I had. Like, yeah, it's awesome, you know? So, yeah, I was kind of making albums, right? You know?
Right.
And so I thought, like, I just want to do that. But my parents were like, listen, you can make albums for a living, but like you have to have some formal education.
Right.
And I was bummed out. I'm like, I don't want to do that, you know. But I did it. So I went to school for it. To be honest with you, this is no slight on that school. I think any school that teaches you production, songwriting, recording, teaches you just enough to be dangerous.
Yes.
They build you up to think like, I'm walking out of here and I know how to fucking make an album.
Right.
And then you walk into a studio and the artist is doing coke and is a nut job and can't focus for 16 seconds, and preamp 3 doesn't work, and the kid that's running Pro Tools like isn't really good, and they don't have the microphones you want to use, and you're trying to produce on a laptop in the back of the room and throw files via USB drive. All of a sudden, everything you know and learned in school falls apart day one.
Yes.
And you're like, this is not the environment that I learned in. Do you know what I mean? And that happened to me.
Absolutely.
Almost what I just said, a lot of that shit literally was like the third day I started at a studio to start producing stuff. I'm like, right out of college, I was 19 years old, you know?
Well, similar for engineers too. It's like I always say, school will teach you how to operate the gear. Yeah, they don't they don't show you how to make stuff sound good.
No, that's a whole different.
Not at all.
Mind. That's just time.
Yeah,
Exactly. And same thing with being a producer too. Like they can teach you how to, how to tune a snare and how to make drums sound what they think is punchy and good, and they can teach you the creative side of things, but realistically, like you have to go through the fire to do that. You have to sit with artists and be pretty bad for a long time. You know what I mean? Before you're like, oh, this production and recording and song came out cool. Right. Right. Like exactly. at the beginning of things, I thought, every kid gets out of those schools thinking like, I'm going to reinvent the fucking wheel.
Of course.
And you go into a studio with an artist and I'm songwriting with them and trying to produce it. And I was the kid that was like, I'm going to throw an F minor in here, but it's not on the key, but it's going to be cool. And then you start to find out, you're like, people don't do that because it's not accessible and people don't like it. It's not that you can't do it, it's that people don't really want it, right? You don't learn that in school. You can't learn that. The creative process is so sacred and such a learned thing. That like without the 10,000 hours, you just don't get there, So I after school, I graduated school. I started interning at a studio, in North Carolina, where I got to work. It was actually like the biggest studio in North Carolina, which actually had like real major label artists coming through it, which was cool, And I was sleeping there. For the most part. I mean, I was living with my parents again when I was 18, 19 years old. I was going home maybe on the weekends to my parents' house, but I was sleeping basically there was an extra office there.
Nice.
And I had because I was the intern, I had the keys to the vending machine. So I probably owe that studio maybe $18 worth of ramen noodle and M&Ms that I was eating, over the course of a year, you know what I mean? Because it cost 18 cents or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, basically at night after the sessions were over, I would like open the vending machine up.
Right.
I wasn't getting paid, so I feel like I'm was like, well, if my pay for the day is a pack of M&Ms and ramen, I'm like, I think that maybe they can, I was here for 12 hours,
Yeah.
So I would literally, that was really what I did for a while. I mean, longer than I think I should have, if I'm being honest. Mm-hmm. But that studio had such great artists coming through it constantly that I didn't want to leave it because I was learning a lot. But when I say learning, I mean I was really observing the process a lot.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really good producers coming through. Of
course.
And a lot of really good artists on major labels that actually had hits on the charts coming through. And I was the only intern there. So I was kind of, again, right place, right time.
Right.
Just was allowed to sort of observe and just be the coffee guy and vending machine person. Yeah. And sat in the back of the room and said nothing for weeks on end, basically,
Exactly.
And just observed and was just a fly on the wall. But I learned so much from watching the producers produce these, like I said, like artists that like, lo and behold, 6 months later, like, oh, that song's in the charts. I was there for that. Like, I understood what it meant to kind of make a hit.
Right.
Or at least be present for the understanding of what a hit meant. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That was priceless. Like, if I'm being honest, I was in college and it's teaching me nearly as much as that.
Yeah. Of course. No, that's where the bulk of the education comes
I credit the college as letting me be in that room. Right. Had I not gone to college, they probably wouldn't have let me in that room. So there's a process that I'm not saying don't do it. I just mean realistically, I did learn more there. If I was able to just go right to that room, I probably would have. But that's not really how it worked back then,
Right. And what led you to LA?
So there was a guy named John Feldman who's a producer, great dude. I loved his productions and his songwriting so much. It was very influential to me as a teenager and. In that era, I was young. I was 21, 22 even. Like I said, I was at that internship for a couple of years. So by the time I kind of got out of it, I was like 21, understanding things, but, building a client base of my own around a small market in North Carolina. It wasn't a big market, but, kind of a good place to start because it's a good place to make mistakes. Also, there's not a lot of people being a producer there. So, it was very easy to go to shows and get bands to come with me and kind of cut my teeth that way.
Nice.
I was a huge fan of John Feldman's. So back in the day, John, had a website that just had like a P.O. box on it, where you could just sort of contact him with demos and stuff like that. Because, this was back when the internet was like still not, I mean, it wasn't new, but like it was new to that side of things. Like people having websites was still kind of new. This was, in 2010.
Okay.
So it's like, bands had websites that were pretty archaic. It was Web 1.0, maybe it was 2009 even, whatever. Yeah, it was in that era where it's like, it was definitely Web 1.0 sort of stuff. And he just had a splash page where you could just send stuff to a P.O. box.
Right.
So I started sending him what I would call a resume, which was just like a list of albums that I had assisted on, produced on, songwritten on. And you gotta remember, these were like, he was probably like, what the fuck is this? It's just a bunch of people from North Carolina. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like anybody, you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? But I sent them probably over the course of a year. I kept sending a letter to that P.O. box.
Right.
And then I started including a CD with it because I'm like, he doesn't know who these people are. Maybe if he listens to it, he'll understand what I'm doing.
Right.
He wasn't going to listen to it. But, that's besides the point. Lo and behold, one of my friends' bands got to do some songs with John.
Okay.
Which I thought was the coolest thing ever, obviously.
Yeah.
Their band was actually really good, And at this point, I wasn't playing in bands anymore. I was like, that's not what I want to do. I want to do this. But I thought it was really cool. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. He goes to LA to work with John. That's super sick.
Right.
So one day he texts me. He's like, hey, I'm not doing anything to the studio, and John asked me to go through a bunch of stuff from his P.O. box because I'm just sitting here, which is really funny. He made the bassist be like, can you just do this? Like, whatever.
Right.
He was like, you have like 16 of them in here. There's like 12 of them in here. I'm like, yeah, I send him like once a month, basically. You know what I mean? He's like, that's awesome. I'm going to tell John that he should bring you out to assist. Like, because he was like, just go through this and see who's like, is worthy of it. or whatever like that. I'm sure there are people that were better in that stack, by the way.
Yeah.
But I happen to know the bassist of the band where he was probably being annoying as shit in the studio, and John was like, "Can you just do this?" You know what I mean? And just by luck of the draw, I had been mailing him shit for a year, so there was 12 of mine and one of some other guys. You know?
Right. That's awesome.
So sure enough, John emails me and is like, "Hey, you know, I got your demo or whatever like that." He didn't know I'd sent 12. He only got the one.
Right.
You know what I mean? You came recommended, like, do you want to come out to LA and do some assistant work for me, you know, in a month or whatever like that. You just need a car.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have a plane ticket. I don't have a car. I actually am terrified of doing this because I really don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm in North Carolina, like, producing local bands, which is fun, but, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to the guy that,
Very
like,
different. Yeah.
very different, that has literally at the time he had, like, a number one. I'm like,
Right.
but you don't say no to that. You just say, sure, fuck it. And if he
Exactly.
hates me, I'll just leave the day after and call it a failed experiment, is how I looked at it, right? So I used a credit card, bought a plane ticket, rented a car,
Right.
and flew out probably, I think, a week or two after, like very, very soon after. I mean, I did not give it much time, you know?
Right.
Went out, spent a few weeks with John. Him and his wife were incredibly kind, where they let me stay at the house, sleep there. I mean, they were very nice, fed me. They were very, very sweet. I mean, I was working for them.
Yeah.
I was working for him for free.
Right.
This was like a better version of the internship, except now I'm around bands that I actually like really fucking like a lot. And that are like
Exactly.
guys I've bought tickets to their show. So this was like, sure. Through that was my first experience in Los Angeles. That was in 2010, I think it was.
Okay.
You know, so 14 years ago. You know. And I really fell in love with. I don't want to say I fell in love with the city, because I actually didn't.
Yeah.
You know, I don't dislike the city, but I fell in love with what was happening.
Right.
I fell in love with the idea that this is where records are being made.
Yeah.
And this is where musicians are. And even if the musicians aren't from here, this is where they're coming to make their albums.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That was really romantic to me. And I fell in love with that very quickly.
Yeah.
And I went home to North Carolina, and I fell out of love with that,
Right.
the thing I was doing there very quickly.
Right.
It felt pointless.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't. But
of course. It was a stepping stone.
it was a stepping stone.
Yeah.
But after doing it for a couple of years, and then you do this experience, and then you fly back, you're like, the pressure wasn't really on. As a matter of fact, me as a 21-year-old producer, or however old I was then, was sort of like kind of just crushing it in that scene.
Yeah.
You kind of think you're king shit of fuck mountain, because you're like, I'm only one of 3 guys here.
Yeah.
And I'm getting all the work.
Yeah.
And making like a pretty good living for a 21, 22-year-old, who just has like an apartment in North Carolina somewhere, which is, the overhead of that is quite low, as you can imagine, as opposed to LA, especially in 2010, 2011,
Right.
I'm not crushing it, but I'm like, I've always been a believer, like, if you're not the best one in the room, if you're the best one in the room, you're in the wrong room, right?
Yeah.
I don't really want to be in a room where I'm the best.
Right.
I want to be in the room where, like, I'm not the best and I have something to learn. Even now, currently, like, the artists I work with, I hope are much above my pay grade.
Right.
I always say, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the way that I'm going to be able to push myself, and probably the artist too, in the right direction.
Of course.
If you get to be on standby mode, where you're just sort of like going with it, and you're sort of like, like mowing the lawn, if you will, like just kind of mindlessly doing the thing you know to do. It's like, we all have days like that, don't get me wrong. I mean, but are we really getting to the core of what we got into this to do? Probably not.
Right.
Probably not.
Right.
So anyway, I went back to North Carolina and really quickly figured out that was what I was doing daily at that point.
Right.
Yeah, right. I didn't know it, but I was kind of doing that daily. So I saved up $10,000 and moved to LA.
Nice.
And that was it took me a couple years to do that. That was not an overnight thing. So I moved here in 2015. Okay. So, a few years after I got back from the John thing. So I did spend a few more years doing that. As a matter of fact, I actually made a really good name for myself in that market, because I think I was pushing myself as much as I could push myself.
Right.
But it wasn't enough for me. I really wanted to work on big records. Now, in between that, I had done a couple of trips back to LA in that 3-year span. I'd come back. I had made some contacts here in LA, so John never flew me back out, just because he didn't really. I mean, LA, I don't know. If you don't live in LA, guys, there's an assistant on every block that would work for John or any other producer. Then it didn't really need me to fly me back out, per se, or even really offer that. It's like, oh, well, like next week we start on the record. I'm like, okay, well, I don't actually live here. Like I can't, and I can't just live at your house. I mean, I would, but they're
Right.
like, you can.
Yeah.
For good reason, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So whatever, that's all good.
Yeah.
But I met a lot of contacts through that trip. And so I flew back out to work with those contacts. And then, so I made maybe one or two pilgrimages.
Right.
Is that the word? Pilgrimages?
Sure.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. A year to LA to sort of work with artists that I'd just stay in the scene.
Build the
Not like,
connection,
just build a little bit of a network here. Not even a client base, because it was mostly assistant work. Maybe I was bringing a song that I had written and started to produce, and we were using it here or there and things just to put my feet in there. But I was really just building a network out here and understanding the scene and really seeing where I fit into it,
Right. Nice.
And then eventually, I'd saved enough money where I was like, okay, I think I'm going to do that, and just moved,
Cool.
So yeah, that's really is eventually how I got to live in LA,
Nice.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool.
So
Awesome. One thing I like to talk a lot about on the podcast is kind of how to get good results from artists in the studio.
okay.
So when you're starting a new project with an artist, how do you approach the creative process?
Sure. This is interesting because my side of things with songwriting and production is I'm really working with, I don't have like artists here for long stints.
Okay.
I'll usually have an artist in for a day or two, and we'll write a song and produce it. And
Right.
we'll work on like one song on the album. Sometimes if it goes well, they'll come back and we'll do 2 or 3 more like that. But I'm not having a band come in for a month.
Right.
And staying.
Right.
That's not what I do. Mainly labels are hitting me up. My A&R contacts and managers are hitting me up for singles
Right.
because I've had enough success in the mainstream world where they're like, hey, this record's coming together, but we don't have a single yet.
Right.
Can we send them to you for a day or two and write and produce?
Okay.
That's kind of my forte. That's kind of my thing. Like if there was a thing I had, it's that probably. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a great question because I don't have a lot of time to learn the artist
Right.
at all.
Huh.
Sometimes, like I said, only one day, hopefully maybe 2.
Right.
The first thing I do is we don't work on music for the first hour or 2
Yeah.
when they come in, which is, I'm sure you get that answer all the time.
Yeah.
I just sit here and just talk with them, kind of like we're talking now, asking about their process, asking where they're from, what they're working on, what's going on in their life.
Just kind of get comfortable.
Just get comfortable with them. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of getting comfortable too at that time.
Right.
Like, because it's about my process too. Like, I can't have someone come in and just sit and stare at the back of my head and just start me just making and writing something.
Of course.
I don't know if it applies to them. I don't know what they're going through. Maybe they have a great home life, so like writing about a broken home isn't the thing that day.
Right.
Maybe they've, maybe they don't have depression, so a song about suicide isn't going to hit with them, or or maybe they are. Maybe they have alcohol problems, and that's whatever that thing is. Like I really have to get it to be them, and that's how I'm going to end up getting the best result out of the artist, which oftentimes ends up in something similar to what a single would probably be, where the artist feels very connected to it.
Right. Exactly.
The production style I have is just what I do, so I feel like that's kind of secondary to the actually getting the artist to feel comfortable with what we're saying and we're doing in the song.
Right.
I also often ask like where their target keys are.
Right.
If they don't know, then we'll figure it out pretty quickly by picking up a guitar.
Yeah.
Is this too high? Is this too low? Is this in a good sweet spot? I'll just play A, G.
Right.
Just go through the like where's a good route?
Right.
But to me, it's more about that
Yeah.
than it is like, oh yeah, it's like I'm open up this synth first or pick up this guitar tone. It's like,
Right.
that stuff is really secondary. I mean, it happens throughout the day,
Of course.
but I couldn't tell you at what point it does.
Right.
Sometimes I'll vibe with an artist right away, and within an hour we have something like that sounds like a scratch down.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it'll be 8 hours later, and we're just getting to the core of the chorus finally,
Right.
and then I'm going to produce it out the next day or something like that.
Yeah.
There's no real formula to that. I mean, that's I think everybody can probably agree with that.
Yeah.
The only formula there is literally just getting the artist and me comfortable with each other.
Of course.
And some days it just doesn't happen, by the way.
Yeah.
Like I always say, like not everyone's meant to work together.
Right.
And that doesn't make me bad or them bad.
Right.
It just means sometimes it's not. We're not meant to be together. As a matter of fact, I would never name names. There's a really big artist that is on BMG that I just had in here for a day. They were like, we want a single.
Right.
I loved his music. Loved his A&R, loved their songs they were sending me that were already on the album.
Right.
And I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to crush this. This is like right in my wheelhouse. This is so awesome. Like I already know, like I already had an idea coming into the day what I wanted to do based on what he was talking about in his songs, his key. Like I knew, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I woke up the day fucking stoked to come in with him. We got here and just, I don't know, him and I just kind of didn't get along. And not like we were fighting.
Right.
We just didn't really have a lot to talk about.
Right.
The ideas I had, he didn't really vibe with. The ideas he had, I didn't really vibe with too much.
Yeah.
And it just didn't really work, you know? And then other days you just have an artist come in that's a new signing and there's not a whole lot there, and you blast out a song that's like is a single for the, you know, that's the first single, and you met him for 12 hours and you moved on and just, you know what I mean? Like it's just, you don't know. I mean, most of the days I think fall in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
Where you have a good day.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
The bad days and the great days are other end. And if you live in that bell curve where you're doing good work every day consistently, then you're hitting the targets, you know?
Yeah,
but, you know, if I do literally, like I think last year I did over 200 songs.
Yeah, nice.
Wrote over 200 songs with artists. You know, if 80% of those are good or bordering on great, then like you're in a high percentile.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I would call it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, if there's 20% that weren't good, that means there's like 30 or 40 laying around that weren't that good.
Right.
Which out of a couple hundred ain't that bad.
Yeah.
That means you got 150, 160, 175 great songs that are being used. You know what I mean? Like that's a pretty good year, you know? That's what I tell people.
Definitely.
You know?
Definitely.
So I think that the process is so interesting. And it's actually one of my favorite parts of making albums and songs is the unknown of that.
Right.
You know?
Right. Exactly. I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free guide, The Art Method, the Advanced Recording Toolkit. In it, I share the details of how you can get pro studio results from your home studio. I've believed for a long time that it's the cooking, not the kitchen. If you can learn some of the advanced methods for getting great results in the studio, you can do it in any studio. I skip the basics and dive into the more nuanced info you need to level up the quality of your home studio recordings. Check it out now at brendandecora.com/art. And now, back to the show. Can you describe a project that pushed the boundaries of your production style?
Sure, yeah.
You don't have to name names or
No, that's
anything.
okay. I can too. I mean, it's fine because they're friends.
Whatever.
Yeah. No, yeah. It actually comes out this week, I think.
Okay.
There's a girl named Charlotte Sands. I'm a huge fan of hers. I have a song on her new album, On the Outside. And I would say specifically the bridge of that song pushed me. Not that the song didn't, but I would say how we got to the bridge pushed me as a producer in a good way. Right. So much so that I kind of listened to it and I'm like, I don't know, like Charlotte and I get along really well. We're homies. She's a wonderful person, one of the best voices I've ever encountered in my 15-year career. I mean, she's insane. So sometimes I wonder, like, when I listen to that song, I'm like, I don't really remember how we got to this idea and how we got here. I can listen to, I know what chords are happening, but I mean, literally, like, the process of getting to that, it's almost like you don't even remember. But the real thing is that Charlotte and I get along really well, and we just did it.
It works.
We just worked. And we did that song in like a day and a half, I think it was. It was actually a day, and then she came back the next day and cut some vocals over again, and we redid some guitars with my friend Dan, you know? But the bridge of that song, we go from this song is like really like big rock and roll choruses, and even the verses are pretty big and like almost like it goes from big to bigger sort of thing, you know what I mean? But then at some point the idea formed with the bridge where we really wanted to do strings. And I don't even remember if it was my idea or Charlotte's idea or whatever. And then I remember that idea floating around like throughout the middle of the day, and in my head I'm just like, I don't really know how that happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you listen to the verse and the chorus of that song and the pre-chorus, it's like, well, you know, think about the day before the bridge was there and it makes sense. But if you think about the day and you just listen to the verse, pre-chorus, chorus and think about like, oh, let's do strings in the bridge. You're like, I don't know how we're gonna get there. Like it just doesn't add up, you know? It just doesn't.
Yeah.
But we did it. And the bridge is like this beautiful arrangement, almost like I don't know if you know the band The National or not, or
I've heard of them.
They're a great band, like very kind of like dreary band, like very very introspective band, and I didn't use them as a reference because I think they're probably too sad because the song is like not necessarily a sad song.
Right.
But listening back, it's like we got to this place in the bridge where it's like it's strings and there's like soft piano touches and there's like ambiance happening all over the place and there's like washing and like we go there for like I think like 16 bars, maybe 32 depending on how you count it. Like not that long.
Yeah.
And then we rip right back into a chorus again.
Right.
And actually after we wrote the bridge, I'm like, well fuck, how the fuck do we get back in the chorus? You know what I mean? Like it was that song pushed me in a way that I really to this day still internalize, Nice. We did this song last year, like almost a year ago now, it's finally comes out now this week, I think.
Right.
At point of listening to this, it's probably already out, obviously, know. But that song, that's a recent memory, I think, because I think I could point to things like that every few years of my career, probably, or maybe even early on, probably a lot, because you're learning a lot, and then it kind of tapers off as you get more, get you older, and you have more experience. I think every year or two you get something like that like really pushes you. But recently, that's probably the most recent example of it. Yeah, is that song? Yeah,
nice. That's cool.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what's the most underrated aspect of music production?
I think the interpersonal part of it.
Right.
I think people overlook that if you, like, I have a style of production.
Right.
So I can do that. I can do that right now. If we sat here for 4 or 5 hours, I could produce a song out for us.
Right.
That sounds like a thing that I would do.
Yeah.
Whether or not it would be a hit or not relies solely on the fact if I can get the artist what they need to get for the song. Right. If I can't get them to give me what I call like the real shit, if there's not tears or anger or whatever like that, whatever that entails, if I can't get them to tell me what's really going on, if I can't get them in the booth to really emote, if I can't get them to get excited about the thing that we're doing, then like it could be I have what I call hard drive hitters for days on my hard drive. They don't ever see a lot of day because it didn't have to do with me.
Yeah.
The artist didn't connect to the idea, or they didn't feel passionately about it, or they didn't give me the real shit. They didn't go in there and give me the real vocal that I know they could give me or like that. If I can't get that out of them, then like it really doesn't matter how great the production is, or even really how good the song is, right? That's why sometimes I write a great song and then I shop it to somebody else.
Right.
Because it's like, well, this didn't really work for them, but it's a great song. So if this person puts their emotion on it and when we taper it a little bit to them, maybe it'll work,
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it oftentimes does. I mean, you hear about that all the time. But I would say the interpersonal, like the psychology of what we do is probably, I mean, it's more than half.
Yeah.
It's more than half.
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to have talent and be able to produce a song.
Right.
But I would say it's like 60% psychology, 40% actually like
absolutely.
Producing
especially as a producer, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You have to have that aspect of it.
Absolutely. And speaking of your production style, can you discuss a time when you had to adapt your production approach to suit a specific artist? Yeah,
I worked on a like kind of alternative country thing.
Okay.
Not that long ago, like mid or late last year, so only less than 6 months ago.
Right.
And I kind of didn't really think it was a good idea for me to do it. But my manager was like, no, the artist really wants to work with you. They like your prior work, even though it's not really all country. They just like your work. I'm like, all right, that's enough for me to get in the studio for a day or two. You know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about coming in for a month.
Yeah.
Like, sure, I'll always do, like spend a day, maybe two, and see what happens. If it's nothing, it is what it is. We had fun. We tried it. It is all good. That's how I look at it anyway.
For sure.
But it went really well.
Okay.
But I definitely had to adapt like the thing I do, but like tweak it with like, okay, how do I do that idea, but like on a slide guitar,
right?
Rather than like a synth.
That's true.
But it's the same. It's just music, right? So like, I have this idea for this noted melody thing. Like, okay, well, let's just do that on a slide guitar instead of on a synth.
Right.
Or instead of a ripping guitar solo, how do we do that on like a banjo? It's still, we can still do the noted thing. We're just applying it to, and that's growth. I think. You know what I mean? Right. I don't think I'm prepared to do that every day because I think people honestly are in that genre that would just beat the shit out of me at the current. But if I do that every once a month for the next couple of years, maybe I will have, I'll get a grasp on that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it was a great exploration of like, it was almost a funny reminder of like, oh yeah, music is just fucking notes.
Right.
I know that sounds dumb So I'm sorry, listener, but like when you get so in your genre of things,
right,
you forget like you can just put this set of notes on anything and it'll sound good.
Yeah.
You know, if I take that synth line but make it a twangy slide guitar on a country song, it sounds as good as it synths with in a pop song, you know?
Right.
You just sort of forget that because you don't do it, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, I kind of like slide guitars. And then for like a week afterwards, I was trying to put slide guitars and everything. And I was like, okay, this doesn't work in other things I do. You know what I mean? But I just became obsessed with slide guitars for like a week, you know what I mean?
Jeez.
Yeah.
And what's the most significant change you've observed in your music production?
I would say the amount of time that I spend with artists.
Okay.
You know, when I was first starting, and again, I mean, I'm aging myself here, but 15 years ago, artists did not come in for a day or two. They came in for a week or two.
Right.
Even to do a couple of songs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was not the expectation was like, oh, we're going to send a band to you and we're going to sit with you for a week and we'll get a song or two out of it.
Right.
Great.
Right.
That's not, I mean, some of that is a testament to technology. Some of it is just the reality of what the music industry become, for better or for worse. I mean, I think there's two sides of that. It's good and bad. Mm-hmm. That's kind of, we could do a whole podcast on that, but we won't go super in depth on that. But that but to me, that's the biggest change. And I think a lot of people have either chosen to adapt to that or chosen just like kind of not, and just throw in the towel in, which is okay. Like a lot of those guys have already made their money and their imprint as well. You know what I mean? They don't necessarily have to adapt to that. They're like, fuck that. I make things this way. I don't want to do it this way. I'm going to retire. That's fine. You know what I mean? I also think my generation is just more adapt to technology and rolling with that evolution because we grew up with it.
Yeah.
You know? Where it's like, I think that I'm more open to like, oh yeah, that's fine. This is how we're doing it now. This is how we're doing it. You know, I get TikTok and Instagram. I get it. You know what I mean? Like, I understand it.
Yeah.
If I like it or not, that's kind of a different conversation. But I understand it, and I know that the market segmentation and how much it means to labels and artists now. Right. So I'm able to roll with those punches.
For sure.
To be honest with you, I don't really know. After doing this way that I do it for now, I don't know if I would like spending 2 weeks with one artist anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's almost too indulgent in a way. And I used to feel like that. Even when that was the thing. Right. Sometimes I'd be thinking, like, why are we still working on this? It felt done 2 days ago. You know what I mean? So I think that some of the rapidness that we experience now is for the better.
Right.
Because there was a lot of money being wasted. I was...
Oh, for sure.
And I mean, when it's going in your pocket, you don't mind it as much.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a lot of money being wasted. Like, there was times when, like, we did not need to be cutting and producing and songwriting one song for a week.
Right.
That wasn't really necessary. After day 3, it was probably in shape to send to mixing.
Yeah.
But we had an extra 3 days, so like, let's fuck around with xylophones and that's fun. But I mean, was it necessary? Probably not. You know what I mean?
Did it improve it? No.
Probably not. So in the bridge, you can have one xylophone part on the right ear, and you're like, oh yeah, we did that Saturday when we had nothing else to do. It's like, well, someone was paying for that. You know what I mean? Like, was that really necessary? You know, like we don't really. I think we're getting to the core of what music is now. And it's also more of a single-based world now too, where it's like I said, we're focusing on songs now. So yeah, I think that's been a huge change. As a matter of fact, I mean, I would say when this started really becoming prevalent in 2019, this style of production, like 5 years ago, I had to make a decision of whether or not this was the thing I wanted to do.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But resounding, it was like, yes, not only do I want to do it, I actually like it better.
Right.
But there was a change. It was a big change 5-6 years ago. Huge change, in the market. Yeah.
Just to be more single-spaced, or what do you
more
mean?
single-spaced, more people coming in and out faster, turnarounds faster, less budget, but you're getting more, so it kind of evens out. Sometimes it actually works in favor.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I would say probably 6 years ago in 2018 is when I felt the change happen.
Right.
I was already doing this before that, but I felt like, oh no, this is the way, not just a way.
Right.
This is how it's going to be going forward.
For sure.
You know? Yeah.
That's crazy. And how do you, I mean, obviously you mentioned you do a lot of like singles stuff. People call you for singles. How do you maintain a balance between artistic integrity and commercial success?
That was a big sigh I just let out. It's a really good question, dude. Okay, first of all, let me just be very honest. I don't know if I always do.
Yeah.
Some days I think I'm more of an artist, and sometimes I think I'm more of a sellout. If I'm being honest. I had a mentor, this guy named Don Dixon. If you look him up online, he's a wonderful human. He did REM, Hootie and the Blowfish.
Nice.
I'm not listing off. He would sit here and tell you. You could look it up on Wikipedia and you're like, oh, I know that.
Right.
He's amazing, right?
Yeah.
I was an intern at that studio.
Okay.
So it was just like, when I was 20 years old. And I don't remember what happened, but we were in the control room. And remember, I said nothing in that time period, right? I was the coffee guy,
right.
Young kid. But Don took a liking to me.
Okay.
And I took a liking to Don.
Yeah.
We became friends. He used to call me Tidewater because he told me that I had a Tidewater accent. It was someplace down south or something. But I was from Long Island. I don't know if I still to this day don't know if he was fucking with me or not. I don't know. But we would get lunch all the time, and when I would bring coffee, he would make sure I got a cup of coffee too. He was just a very, very sweet guy.
Right.
Incredible producer. One of the best I've ever seen. Even to this, to watching him work was amazing. But we were sitting in the control room, and I remember the record was on. It was on an Americana record that a label had picked up with these 3 girls. It was a great record, by the way. The girls are great, super nice. But the music was very avant-garde. Okay. And Don was probably being paid fine to do the album. I have no idea, really. I don't know. But I'm just assuming it wasn't REM. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's fine because he liked the project.
Right.
But something happened in the studio, and he was on the talkback, and he was saying something, and he was sort of getting agitated about something. He let the and he let the talkback go. And I'll never forget this. He goes to me, he goes, Tidewater, because he's what he called me.
Yeah.
He was like, if anyone ever asks you to sell on this industry, you just ask him where to fucking sign. Because I guess in that moment he was like, why am I doing this avant-garde Americana record? Like, I should have just said yes to the next REM thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, he probably took it because he really liked it. He probably loved the music and loved the girls.
Right.
But, on week 3, after, 86 hours a week, he's probably like, God damn it, So, me saying that some days I'm more of a sellout and some days I'm more of an artist, I don't think is bad at all.
Right.
I don't think the stuff I sell out on isn't necessarily artistic, and I don't think the stuff that I do artistically isn't necessarily commercial. Right. I just think that there's a pendulum swing. Sometimes you nail it right in the middle, but most of the time you're going to lean one way or the other. But I'm aware of that. Some days an artist comes in and I just know, we're really aiming for commerciality here, so I need to lean into that and stop the friction. Right. And some days an artist comes in and they're aiming for artistic freedom, but the label wants a single. So I need to find a way to get us a little bit more to the pendulum to the right, but while giving them the left, And then sometimes an artist comes in and the album's already done and they're just looking for like B-sides or like track 8s where I can just be like, yeah, like fucking do whatever, you know what I mean? Like, so like, I think staying aware of it is the key. Right. I think if you're not aware of it, that's when you start to create that, there's that friction when you go home and you're like, what am I doing with my life? But it's like pretty much within the first hour or two, I know what sort of day it's going to be. Right. I think knowing that is actually just the key to it all. Yeah.
Exactly. Nice. And how do you stay updated with the latest production techniques and tools?
Just listening to current albums.
Okay.
Watching YouTube videos. Constantly buying the new synthesizer that's out. Which honestly... is actually, I shouldn't have said that because honestly, some of that stuff is secondary. Yeah. But we also, people forget the music industry has become a technology industry as well. Absolutely. So like, I can't be using Expand 1 in Pro Tools from 2012. It's going to sound cheesy. Like, you do have to keep up with some of that shit. Yeah.
I mean, when I walked in this morning, there was boxes outside.
There was boxes. Omnisphere 2 is in there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
New toys.
There's new toys. Exactly. You do have to stay up to date on some of that stuff. Yeah. I don't think it's the end-all be-all because if you don't have good taste, none of that stuff fucking matters. Right. If you have a bad idea, I don't care if you have a nice synth or a nice guitar, it's not going to sound good. But when you have good ideas, that's when that stuff does start to matter. It gives you options and it's part of a toolbox. Yes,
absolutely.
So I always tell people, don't invest in a bunch of stuff right away. Invest in your knowledge base first, and only then can you build your toolbox out. All the stuff you're seeing in here, I did not have when I was making records, even when I moved to LA 10 years ago. You know what I mean? I had a laptop and like... probably a UA interface, whatever, but that got me my gigs, you know what I mean? Yeah. It wasn't until I knew how to really use this stuff and implement it to my workflow where it was conducive to the work environment did I get it. Right. Exactly. So, But watching a lot of YouTube videos, I know that's silly, but like, you know, I've done Produce Like a Pro videos before.
Okay.
And I love Warren stuff. I just like going on YouTube and searching modern production techniques. Some TikTok stuff too, if you subscribe to like Music Talk or Production Talk. That stuff's cool.
Nice.
Listening to, honestly, the best way though, to me, is listening to records that are coming out and deconstructing them as a producer. Because maybe I would have done the technique in a different way, but it's still you get there in your own way.
Right. Exactly.
But if you're like, man, how did Mark Ronson do this thing? Mark Ronson's not going to be on a YouTube video the next day anyway. It might be a year or two later.
Right.
But like that's when he feels comfortable giving up the knowledge, right? So like maybe he's already done something cooler, so he's like, yeah, whatever, take that one.
Right.
You want to know it now. I want to know it now, so I can deconstruct it. So the best way to do it to me is I listen to albums, mainly in headphones, and come in the studio and sort of deconstruct the idea. It's like, the same idea of like someone that wants to learn how an engine works, you take it apart and put it back together.
Yeah.
Same general idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice. Can you share some current or recent projects that you're allowed to talk about?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I can talk about most of the stuff that's coming out.
Okay.
Charlotte Sands on the Outside's coming out. I have a Plain White Tee song coming out. I'm a huge fan of theirs. The Struts just came out. That I worked on their new record. Little Lotus just came out featuring Mod Sun. I did that record and that single that's doing well right now.
Okay.
I'm working on the new Mod Sun album that's coming out. I have a song or two on there, depending on how it ends up being labeled. This band named Arrows in Action. I have a song coming out with them that I love. I don't know when this episode will post, but a lot of the stuff I'm talking about will be out by March. Yeah. So right now it's January. So in the next couple of months, some of it's already out. I mean, some of it's already, the stuff I'm talking about, some of it is already out.
Yeah.
And then some of it will be slowly filtering out over the next couple of months,
Okay.
Yeah. There's a band named Instant Crush that is a smaller band, but I just really like them a lot.
Nice.
I have some songs coming out with them. This band named Diva Bleach, who's on Thriller Records.
Okay.
They're great. So good. They're breaking on the scene now. They have some great tours coming up.
Right.
Did most of their album that's coming out.
Nice.
I have a single coming out with this band named Young Rising Suns, who I love. They're on Sony. They're a New York band on Happy Hour. That's one of my favorites. That was one of the best sessions I had of 2023.
Okay.
Was that song with Young Rising Suns,
Nice.
and it's coming out finally. And again, I think like March or April. So depending when this is played,
Nice.
So yeah, I mean that's a pretty nice list, I guess. I don't know.
Sure.
It's funny because after you leave, I'll look through like, oh, I didn't say this, whatever. Those are just the ones that pop in my head.
Yeah,
whatever.
No problem. Awesome.
Yeah.
I like to wrap up each podcast with the same kind of few set of questions.
Great.
First one is, who is your most influential teacher? And it can be a few if you want.
Sure. Eric Valentine. Before I met him and after meeting him. Before I met him, I would study his records. Then after meeting him, he was by far the most influential mentor I've ever had.
Of course.
He was the person that taught me the psychology about this stuff probably the most.
Right.
I mean, you're always aware of it.
Yeah.
But being taught it is a different thing.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
No, like navigating it yourself is one thing, but then being taught it is like, that's a whole different world.
Right. Nice.
Probably Eric. Other than that, I mean, John was a huge teacher, but in a much different era of my career, where I think he really opened my eyes up to what this world is. I mean, what this production, like what really it takes to do this.
Yeah.
And that was a defining moment in my what ended up being. I didn't really have a career at that point, remember? I mean, I did. Like, I was making money back home, like I explained, but I don't know if I had a career, That was really like, oh, I understand what it means to have a career in this industry. Do I want to do this?
Right.
That was a pivotal moment for me with John. Even though John doesn't even know he did that. That wasn't really. That's not. He just introduced me to what this really is.
Right.
Truly, really is.
Right.
So I would say those two people. Eric probably being the biggest influence on my actual like skill set, and John being a huge influence on actually being pivotal in like of making this like a real career.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. The next question may or may not apply to you. It's basically, what is your favorite reference track? It's made for like engineers if you have to go in the studio.
Gotcha. No, I have a reference track.
Okay.
For production.
Yeah.
Which is funny because it's an older song, but it's still so fucking modern that it drives me nuts.
Right.
Eric Valentine's All American Rejects Gives You Hell.
Okay.
everything about that, the arrangements, the chord changes, the percussion, how they get to one section to another.
Right.
Very interesting how they get to the bridge. Again, like very defining moment for that band and Eric, I think.
Huh.
And also Eric's Smash Mouth All-Star, which I know has become a meme, but literally, if you listen to that song, it's masterful.
Yeah.
Those two songs I reference for production all the time because they were done so long ago, and they literally feel like they could be on a record now, and they would feel modern.
Yeah.
So there's some amount of timelessness inside of the alternative genre that those both fit into that I think are just undeniable. So I listen to both of those a lot when I'm lost on production, even if the song sounds nothing like that, which they probably won't or shouldn't, for that matter, because that's already been done.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what is so timeless about these? And why is this song? Why are these songs still so modern and hip and still strike a chord with people?
Right.
You know.
Right.
So as a producer, I'm looking more like that and less about like, oh, sonically it's this or that. You know, I'm thinking more about like the overall dissertation of how the song is presented and as to why it's still so modern.
Right.
You know.
Right. Nice. And last question, what would be one tidbit for an upcoming producer?
You really, honestly, 10,000 hours. Like, submit to the fact that you're going to have to spend a lot of time getting, like, kind of good at this.
Yeah.
And then you're going to spend a lot more time getting good at it. And then hopefully, eventually, you're going to get great.
Right.
You know? But, I mean, I only now, and I mean this, I've been doing this for 15 years. The last 5 or 6 years, I feel like I've gotten really good at it. Yeah. And not to be cocky, I just mean I genuinely think the first 10 years of my career was good, and it was fine. And there were some moments in there that I struck, not by accident, but just like, you know, moments.
Right.
But only the last 5 or 6 years do I feel like I can hit it more often than I can't.
Right. Right.
And again, I've been doing this for 15 years, you know? So it's like,
Nice.
You know, so I think, and some people struggle with the fact they get a hit. I did not have a hit early in my career. So some people struggle with, I don't know what's worse, not getting one too later or getting it early and then not being able to get one again for a while.
Right.
Because that I've had friends that have done that.
Yeah.
And it makes it, the come down of that is really hard.
Right.
As opposed to doing it and getting a hit, you're like, yeah, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I might not get one for a while again, but that's okay because I had one for a while before I was making a career. But you get a hit and you get a career and then you can't get another one again. That's tough.
Yes.
So even talking to producers now that may have something on the viral charts, or maybe that's a hit right now in the top 100, it's gonna take time.
Yeah.
Even if you're in the top 100 now, like in 6 months, that could all fucking change.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I remember an A&R agent said to Eric once that he went cold. Like, in other words, like he didn't have any hits.
Right.
And Eric was not mad about that.
Yeah.
But he was like defiant of that, where it's just like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not a fucking robot. Like, I'm a person.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and also, what defines a hit? Like, how dare you tell me, maybe your label didn't make it a hit. Maybe I gave you a hit and you didn't do, you know what I mean?
Right.
So there's so many layers to that and learning the industry that as a producer, you're not going to get a hit. Some of the best songs I've ever made, I think, and written don't do well because there's other things in the industry that prevent it from that.
Right.
Bad timing. You know, sometimes you have a great song and then COVID happens. Like that happened. You know what I mean? And nobody gives a shit about it. That happened to me. You know, okay, well, there it is. There, everything gets canceled. The tour gets canceled. The music video shoot gets canceled. And like, well, things that happen. Also, there's so many politics. A&R serving other producers.
Right.
And maybe there's less or more points on an album, so they're going to push that more or less. I mean, there's just so much in the industry that, like, honestly, even someone that's been in it for so long, sometimes I don't even want to know about it because it's scary to me. Like, the odds behind the curtain is too scary for me. Where I'm like, I just need to go in there and make the best songs I can every day. Because you start to get wrapped up in all these things. You're like, dude, this is impossible, you know? But it's not. But what I'm just telling people is, like, just submit that it is going to take time. Even if you get early success and you want to stay in it, it's going to take more time, you know? Or if you haven't had any success yet, it may take more time to get there, you know? So just that's submit to that
just
fact.
Stick with it.
Yes, stick with it, slow burn it.
Find
the enjoyment in it. You know, like, just come into work and do your best work and enjoy it every day. Because if you're just looking for that hit and you're just getting impatient, like, that's the best way to turn off artists and labels, is just to be that guy, you know?
Exactly.
Truly.
Nice. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dude. This was so much fun. Come back anytime. This is awesome.
Sweet.
Cool.
Thanks for joining in today on Pro Audio Profiles. Make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next week.